Welcome to the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton. I'm your host, Spike Spengel. Tim, it is so great to be joined by you today. How are you doing?
Doing great, Spike. This is our first show together.
This is our first show. I thank you for letting me join you on the Retirement Blueprint. This is a machine that you've had going for a long time, and we've got a great topic that we're going to go through today. So are you excited to jump in?
I am. Let's jump right in.
All right. Well, folks, we are so very excited because we are going to be talking about several retirement risks, the kinds of things that you do inside your practice every single day that you're aware of. They could be blind spots for a lot of the folks that are out there. A few of them that I know that we're going to get to, we're going to talk about interest rate risk and market risk, and another one which could be a little more complex for folks, sequence of returns risks. So you ready to jump in, buddy?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, interest rate risk, it's definitely on people's minds right now. And we've heard all of the rumblings right now, how interest rates might get risen 3, 4, 5, upwards of 6 times this year. Mm-hmm. But for today's retiree, what is the risk for interest rates, especially if they're at a place where they're maybe have paid down their mortgages and so forth? Is interest rate risk something that a retiree today needs to worry about?
Well, it definitely is, and I will tell you, interest rate risk is really divided into two general areas. We have the risk of growth. And so if you think back a couple of decades when interest rates were a lot higher, we had 5, 6, 7%. You go back a little further than that, even double-digit returns for people that own CDs. And so imagine, owning a CD and getting, 8, 9, 10% guaranteed by the bank. I mean, those days were amazing for people on the growth side. And today, we're looking at interest rates at like 1%. And so if I am retired and I'm trying to grow what I have and grow that nest egg, and all I'm going to get is a 1% interest rate, and that is in direct competition with inflation operating at 3%, I'm literally losing ground every year.
Right.
And so that's a key component. Now, on the income side, that's another issue. If I'm getting a 1% return of interest income on my portfolio, how am I going to live?
Yeah. I want to push on that just a little bit because you said inflation around 3%. That's a nice round number that we've used in financial planning services for decades. Mm-hmm. But what has inflation really been over the last year or so?
Well, it's been a lot higher than that, Spike. I mean, as you're aware, and I think people, here in Dayton, you go to the gas pump and gas is more expensive than it was.
Yeah.
And then we've had additional logistical issues where people, like grocery stores and things, can't get products. And so there's been a rise in cost because of fuel with transportation. There's been a rise in cost with a lot of different things. And then on top of that, we're just starting to see things like medical, where that's operating at almost twice the normal rate of inflation. I like to look at inflation more in a long-term outlook. And so I'm not going to look at, a potential 5 or 6% inflation rate today and say, oh my gosh, it's going to be like that forever.
Right.
But I'm also not going to look at some of the times we only had a 1% inflation rate and say that's going to happen. So I think 3% from a long-term planning standpoint makes sense, but I think the people at home are definitely feeling a bigger impact today than they have in years past.
If you wouldn't mind, because I know that you're well scholared in this, I understand that there's kind of an inverse relationship with interest rates and bond values. And again, we're talking about safety, and this is where a modern retiree likes to go today.
Right.
But with interest rates changing and it decreases bond values, how exactly does that work?
No, that's a great question. And I think back to 1994. In 1994, I was working at a bank. And I remember a lot of people then owned tax-free bonds, so municipal bonds.
Okay.
And so 1994 comes along. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates 7 times in 1 year. Now, you're exactly right in what you said. People are buying those for safety, right? And so you got to ask the safety of what? If it's the safety of things going up and down, that's not necessarily the case. They're buying it for safety of income. And of course, in 1994, their income didn't change, but at the end of the day, if you had $1 million in municipal bonds and you got a statement halfway through the year where it's worth 750, sirens went off, panic set in, and people really didn't expect that because they bought that for safety. Now, in their mind, they probably bought it because they didn't think it could go up and down, and they got a hard lesson learned with that one.
Well, and that's the big worry, and that's kind of my next question is, if bonds are where people would go for safety, and that interest rate risk is that the risk isn't there, there is no return right now, very little return in it. So where does a retiree go for safety right now, which would also provide them maybe a little bit of income?
No.
Does this mean they have to jump to the stock market?
Well, I mean, certainly that is an option for higher return potentially, but also with added volatility. The question that you asked really revolved around safety, and so they're certainly not going to find safety in something that has volatility or a lot of volatility potentially. So one of the a guy that I follow pretty closely is a Yale professor.
Okay.
And he did a white paper, this is probably 5 or 6 years ago, on that exact subject. And I mean, he's professor at Yale of economics, right? I mean, pretty smart guy. And he had basically said that, trying to find that safety in bonds, looking at, the historicals, the last 30 years have been phenomenal because, as the interest rates have gone down, those values increased. And his projection is the exact opposite of that over the next 30 years, which makes sense, right? We're going to have bookends on any extreme. And so his whole white paper, which is just really interesting, was on the idea of a indexed annuity as a bond alternative that offers protection on the downside of the market, eliminates interest rate risk, and gives people that opportunity to earn a similar return to historical bond returns that's much higher than what bonds are paying today. The interesting thing is that he was totally against annuities and those types of products. And so literally he has this whole thing laid out of why he didn't like this idea until he researched the idea. And this is a Yale professor saying, hey, this is a great alternative. So we've seen a lot of people look at that as an alternative to, the problems that you just brought up.
Right. And let's be honest, an annuity might not be for everyone.
Definitely.
But you've got a Yale University professor who changed his own mind. And I think a lot of that is happening lately. I've heard it said before, not all annuities are bad, but there are some bad annuities. Things have changed over the last decade with those. So I get that. So that's one of the places that you're talking about as a possible solution.
Right.
For some consistent income. We don't ever like to use the word guarantee, but maybe a consistent income source, and definitely not all of your pie, correct? You're talking about it as part of a sliver of it?
Well, just like you would with the bond portion of the portfolio, right? It's going to represent a portion of the portfolio. And so, one of the things that we like about that option is that they offer a zero cost indexing option. So it's basically a way for you to participate and get indexed returns, which should be the equivalent of bond returns over time, without having the big expenses that a lot of times are associated with annuities.
Right. Folks, I know that there's a lot of information that we're talking about here. We're going to continue to talk about retirement risks. But if you would like your own complimentary retirement blueprint, you do need to reach out here. You'll get to talk to Tim personally, but you do need to reach out to the phone number, 855-684-3485. You can start your own complimentary retirement blueprint. We're going to come back to the retirement blueprint right after this very brief break.
Hello, Dayton. This is Tim Lofton from Dayton's premier financial show, The Retirement Blueprint. If you are on the cusp of retirement or recently retired, please tune in every Sunday at 10 a.m. after Meet the Press on NBC Channel 2 as we discover how to plan and thrive in retirement. See you on Sunday, Dayton. Unexpected events, like a global pandemic, can turn our world upside down overnight. They can cause volatile shifts that may cause you to question the confidence in your current retirement plan. As a retiree or a pre-retiree, knowing you have a plan that can withstand the worst economic conditions is vital. Contact us today for a complimentary review. Get a second opinion and learn more about our trademark process, the Retirement Blueprint. Let us plan your tomorrow today.
Welcome back to the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton. I'm your host, Spike Spengel. Tim, we're having a great conversation today about retirement risks, the kinds of maybe blind spots that somebody who's doing this kind of planning on their own might not necessarily be aware of. Although this next one that I want to talk about, I think we hear a lot of headline risk about this, a lot of the news. I want to talk about market volatility and market risk. For someone who is maybe a couple of years from retirement, or maybe those first 2 or 3 years into retirement, watching the market can be quite harrowing. Why, after we've saved so much, is market risk so daunting for people in the beginning of their retirement?
Well, Spike, that's a great question, and there's a lot to unpack there.
Take your time. Your show, sir.
You know, the first thing to keep in mind when you're talking about risk is that's like me saying the word car. You know, a lot of times, you know, risk is perspective, and so what may be risky to one person is not necessarily risky to another. So the first key piece of this is really defining risk. And we have a process that we do that with, called Riskalyze. We've talked about it on the show forever. And it won the Nobel Prize for Economics. It's a great piece of software. And the whole key component to it is to take what somebody currently owns, so where they are today, and assign a risk number to it, and then give them the tools to understand what that means. Because so often people come into the office and they say, well, you know, we're risk adverse or we're fairly aggressive. And so they throw out those terms, but those terms aren't really defined.
Right.
So when we're able to put it up on the screen and say, okay, where things stand today, and this is where our wealth management team is so good. I mean, they are so good at really getting in the weeds and being able to do an evaluation for somebody and say, all right, so in 2008, when things were bad, here's exactly what your portfolio did the way that it sits. And then in 2013, when things were good, here's what happened with that. And so people can see in black and white, because so often they get one of those reports, you know, their advisor prints them out some sort of 30-page document that they don't understand, and it's got charts and graphs, and this is super simple. Your risk is a 67. Here's what that means. Here's what happened in 08. Here's what happened in 13. And they can see in dollars and cents the up and down. That gives them the starting point. Because for somebody to come in and say, all right, you know, we want to shift to this or pivot to that, or we want to change this or change that, without a reference point, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you're shifting and pivoting from what? Like, they have to understand where they are. So that's kind of that first step. And then, you know, the second thing to remember is that once you've defined risk, that's great. But risk is not developed for risk's sake. So this isn't the question, Spike, that a lot of times you hear advisors ask, well, you know, on a scale from 1 to 10, you know, where do you fit in?
Yeah.
That's not the right question. That's the question to ask in the accumulation phase. Like when I'm saving money to get to retirement, that's a great question to ask.
Okay.
Not the question to ask when I'm in retirement, because that has to be driven by the plan. You have to have an income plan in place that says, here's what I have to have on a monthly basis to do what I need to do, to supplement my Social Security, to supplement my pension. That has to be defined. It will tell you how much risk you have to take. And then the third piece of that, and this is probably the most important, is the risk that we take is really taken into account with the growth part, the part that we have to have increase over time. The piece that's tied to our income cannot have volatility tied to it. Because if you think about it, think about 2008 and think about all these metrics that, when someone comes in and they say, well, somebody ran that Monte Carlo simulation for me, and, my advisor said everything's going to be all right. I'm like, okay. I said, well, what metrics did they use to figure that? They said, well, if I get this return and inflation averages this, and there's all these moving pieces of the pie. And if my question, well, what if that doesn't work out? What if those metrics don't happen? Because those metrics are typically based on a straight line path. So I'm going to get 6% return, and inflation's going to average exactly 3%, and I'm going to take out exactly 3.5%. And that's not how life works. The market goes up and down, interest rates go up and down, taxes go up and down. You have to be able to understand then this is kind of, we've talked about in shows past about assigning jobs to the money. Okay?
Yeah.
And so when you have an income need, that's the start point. I need $2,000 a month. That has to go into a back calculation of how much money does it take to generate $2,000 a month. That portion has to generate $2,000 a month. That's its job.
That's its job. It has to do that.
Has to do that. So I can't have that job tied to $2,000 a month not happening. So if it's connected to volatility, it might happen, it might not, or it may go away. That's not an option. Now, the growth part, that's a different story. With the growth part, its job is growth. Well, growth inherently comes with more risk and volatility, and it's totally okay. And that's not age-based, it's job-based. Does that make sense?
Well, all I have to do is sit back and relax. This is like a master class right now in volatility. Thank you so much. And for those who are soaking a lot of this in right now, for those here right in the Dayton area, folks get to watch a lot of national broadcasts and so forth, but you're right here in the local area. I know that you do the retirement blueprint, and I know that you'll talk about risk and you'll take this into account. Can you give me a little bit of framing on what they will get out of the retirement blueprint and market volatility if they call the number on the screen?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, Dayton, listen, everyone has a level of risk that they feel comfortable with, but more importantly, let's get down to what we're actually talking about here. You're talking about a successful retirement. Not running out of income. That's what we're worried about. That's what we want to come alongside you and figure out how can we put a plan in place that makes sure that the worst doesn't happen. You have the ability to take control of that, and it's complimentary. All you have to do is give us a ring. We will sit down with you, we will listen, and we will help you find a solution that's the right fit for you. Not for us, but for you. Pick up the phone and give us a call. We would love to meet you. We'll buy you a cup of coffee, sit around the table, and get to know each other.
Deb, we have to take a very quick break. We're going to continue to talk about retirement risks. In fact, one more big one to unpack, if you don't mind. We're going to talk about sequence of returns and what that means to you, the retiree. Please do get your retirement blueprint, though. It is complimentary to get started. All you have to do is call the number right here, 855-684-3485. We'll be right back after this very brief break.
Hi, I'm Tim Lofton, and for 27 years, we've been helping people just like you navigate to and through retirement with our trademark process, the Retirement Blueprint. Many of our clients are extremely concerned today with the increasing federal debt and the potential for a significant increase in taxes. If you share these or other retirement concerns, give us a call today for a no-obligation complimentary consultation. Let us plan your tomorrow today. Retirement is about choosing where you want to go and mapping out a plan to get there. That's why I created the Retirement Blueprint. Of course, things don't always go according to plan. Come learn how our team can help you avoid potential hazards and find alternate routes. We're here to do life with you and share your journey. Let us blueprint your life to keep you on track to make sure you get the most out of retirement. Are you on the road to success? Call us today for a complimentary review to find out. Let us plan your tomorrow today.
Thank you so much for coming back, Dayton, to the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton. And today we are talking about retirement risks, the kinds of things that can keep you from going on that retirement path that you want to. Every single day is a Saturday, and you, Tim, want to keep it that way for everybody. Right before the break, though, I just had one quick follow-up question. We're talking about market volatility. And there's nothing that I can control, nothing that you can control, nothing that the retiree can control about that. So what do you do when those volatile bumps in the road come? Are you actively managing? Have you set a risk tolerance before these bumps happen? What do you do when you get somebody who might call you who is worried about what's going on, or for that matter, a viewer who's out there and say, I love what you're saying about risk, but I don't know what to do. How do you take the steering wheel for them?
Well, the good news, Spike, is I don't have to take that call because that's what our wealth management team does. So I put them on hold, and then I yell at Matt or Lung, and I transfer the call. So that's what I do. But as far as what they do, that's a great question because that comes up, right?
Yeah,
and
sure.
So, you know, one of the things that we hear as I'm sitting around the table with the team is the wealth management guys, one of the things that they say, and I think this is so powerful, is we don't make changes when things are bad. We make changes when things are good because we experienced bad and didn't like it, right?
Yeah.
And so we make proactive changes, and usually the only time we have to do that, Spike, is if we, and I wouldn't even say that we got it wrong, but maybe a client felt like they had more of a risk tolerance than they actually did. And that happens. And I will tell you this, risk tolerance changes over time. You know, I mean, think back 20 years ago for you or for me. I mean, I wasn't...
Put the pedal on the metal, yeah, all the way down to the floor, right?
Heck yeah. Like, you know, risk wasn't even a consideration because of what? How much time you had. Now, one thing that I will tell you from the planning side is that somebody has that same amount of time in retirement. Remember that the life expectancy of a married couple, one of them makes it to 94. So if we're sitting down with somebody that's 60, 65, we're talking about 30 to 35 years. So I don't want to lose sight of that because I think a lot of times retirees get this idea that
too conservative too early.
Too conservative too early. That's exactly right. The other problem is that they get too conservative too early because they didn't give a job to their money to begin with. And so getting conservative with what has to produce income is totally okay. But getting too conservative with the portion that's got to grow, outpace inflation, and do the things that it has to do in the future, that's where the problem is.
Right.
And so if they have the right jobs for the portfolios, they don't typically run into those problems.
Well, I'm going to give you all of 5 minutes here because that's what we have in the program, but I've got a very important topic. I did mention it. It's called sequence of returns, and to sort of recap it for you, but you're the expert here. We're drawing down our money, and it's coming out monthly or biweekly as we need it for our bills, and this market volatility is going up and down, and if we have 2 or 3 or 4 negative months in a row, it's kind of like doubling down on how much money we're taking out. What does the sequence of returns mean to those who are watching the program, and how can you help control this?
Sure. And so sequence of return risk is it's a fancy term in, financial planning and investment world, but at the end of the day, you get this. You retire when you retire. And some people retired in the summer of 2008. Right?
Yeah.
Some people retired in 2013. They both had very different experiences in those initial years, right? And so you can't pick your luck on how things are going to go with the economy and the markets and taxes and what the government's going to do. That's out of our control. And I think if you think about it from that standpoint, it's daunting. It's scary. But you do have things that you can control by choosing the risk that you take. And this goes back to what we were talking about, before break. If I don't have volatility attached to my income, as far as what's producing the income, then risk and volatility really isn't a concern for me long term because, again, I've got 20 years, 30 years. And so I can weather those downturns. The problem is not everybody does that. In fact, most of the time they don't have a job for their dollars. It's all one big thing, and they're doing exactly what you said. It goes down. They were taking a very conservative withdrawal rate of 3 or 4%. Now all of a sudden, 2008 happens, and now they're taking a withdrawal rate of 8%, and they've lost 30 or 40 or 50% plus of their assets. That's what they can't afford to have happen. And so
you're making my stomach do flip-flops right now. So
it's uncomfortable, and especially if you don't have a paycheck coming in. You know, when you have a paycheck coming in 2008, you're just mad. When you don't have a paycheck coming in, it's downright scary.
Right. And to talk just about a weird anomaly, I don't even know in my brain where I'm going to go with this right now, but there was the blip of what happened with the pandemic, right? The market went down again some 30%, but it came back up within the matter of 2 or 3 months. That doesn't happen very often. But strangely, there's been what's called the Great Resignation recently. Now, if this had happened and it was 2008, did you see back in 2008 less people retiring because of what happened to their accounts as opposed to right now where it seems like people are jumping to retirement?
Absolutely, and this is definitely a different time. That, you know, 2008 was a financial decision, okay? You know, people said, you know what, I've got to wait this out. Like, I just can't afford, I can't make the numbers work. You know, I had a plan that said that this was going to happen, it didn't happen. I've got to wait for it to fix itself. Today, this is pandemic driven, and so it's a completely different thought process of, I don't want to be in the workplace anymore. Or the, you know, we've been having clients that, you know, have just said, I can't do what I did anymore. I don't feel comfortable or safe, or this is my time to get out.
And what makes me comfortable about this is that your clients have had your phone number to be able to call. Before we leave the program here today, we only have a few seconds left. Can you tell us a little bit about the retirement blueprint and what they get when they call the phone number here?
Sure. Today is your opportunity to take control of your retirement. It's your opportunity to be in charge and to be intentional about your next steps for the rest of your life and what that's going to look like. And it's exciting. We want to share that with you. Give us a call. Take the time to take an hour out of your day and sit down with somebody who's willing to listen and wants to genuinely help. Call us today. It's 855-684-3485. Thanks.
Tim, thank you so much for letting me join you on this program today. Folks, you've been watching the Retirement Blueprint. We are going to come back with more information, more about analysis and so forth in next week's program. Thank you so much, and please make sure that you call for your own Retirement Blueprint.